Unfortunately for you, it is Jim. And today, we're gonna be talking about Dark Souls 3 again. The question of the day being, how do you even use poison in this game? The short answer? You don't. Good night, everybody. The long answer? It's a bit more complicated than you would think.
Now in this poison build, they slowly and agonizingly die. Oh my, please die by poison. Please die by poison.
Let me explain. Poison is generally regarded as the most underwhelming status effect in the entire game. And what, there's only like 4? Many in the community do not view poison as a useful tool at all. And this sentiment isn't necessarily wrong. Why is this? Well, let us first understand why poison isn't as strong as it probably ought to be. When Dark Souls 3 was first released, poison worked as simply as this. Once your poison meter was filled, you were poisoned for 3 minutes. It didn't matter if it was done with a poisoned weapon, poisoned throwing knives, poisoned arrows, or even the poison mist pyromancy. They all had the same effect. As each second went by, you were dealt 3 damage per tick. 3 damage times 180 seconds equals somewhere around 540 total damage. That's really not a lot in this game. Poison is also easily cured by consuming purple moss clumps, drinking divine blessings, and by casting the miracle caressing tears. To add further insult to injury, you can carry up to 99 purple moss clumps and 99 blooming purple moss clumps at any given time. Not to mention that all of the above are cheap to obtain as well. So combine the lack of damage with the overabundance of curing consumables, and this has made the thought of being poisoned nothing more than a mere nuisance at best. However, not all was completely lost for poison. A year after the game's release, FromSoft surprisingly patched poison's duration and damage. Took them long enough. Now, if a player is poisoned by player-inflicted means, this again includes poison arrows, poison throwing knives, using a weapon with either innate poison or buffing it with rotten pine resin, they are now dealt with 7 damage per second over 90 seconds. This equals out to a total of about 630 damage, which is a definite increase for half of the previous duration. And depending on your health pool, poison could potentially do even more damage. 6.3% of your total health, to be exact. Reddit user Okay. Do I really have to look up Google to say this guy's name? Reddit user Rhubarbatross found this handy calculation, God bless them. So say for example, you had 1213 health, and you got poisoned. It would now do 706 damage total. Side note number 1. This only takes into account player-inflicted poison. I was careful to use my words. Environmental poison remains the same, unpatched. And speaking of poison damage, the Storyteller staff is a unique case when it comes to poison. And when I mean unique, I mean that I have no damn clue how to reliably calculate the amount of damage it really does. But I can, with certainty, say that it does much more damage than the typical poison. Same person, different numbers. The difference is nearly 2 times. But now let me get into the information that y'all are really looking to hear. How useful is poison really? For the PvE fans out there, I got some sweet news. This same poison knowledge can be applied to the bosses you fight. But not too fast. FromSoft doesn't want you having too much fun. Of all 25 bosses in the game, including its DLCs, only 11 can actually be poisoned. And this is where the Storyteller staff comes back into play. If you have the stats to spare for 12 intelligence, then grab a Storyteller staff and start casting its weapon art. If you're smart and you don't miss, you can get the poison to be procced with relative ease. Then just watch the damage pile on. Here's what the Storyteller ended up doing to both Old Demon King and Pontiff Sullivan. Now compare that to normal poison. Yeah, big difference. Now that we got PvE out of the way, some of you are still going, well, big whoop, how does this make poison useful in PvP? You can still hotbar a purple moss clump and be right as rain if anybody even dares try to hit you with poison, which is a solid counter actually. But that right there is exactly the point of poison. The best means in order to kill another player, be them a host or an invader, is the fastest way to kill them. Some of the best methods include using weapons that combo an enemy for multiple hits, or by parrying an enemy into high repost damage, or just getting a giant weapon and smacking them to the ground with your hyper armor. Your goal is to do a lot of damage in a short amount of time. You have to kill the other player before they can drink their Estus or retreat, etc. In my experience, poison requires a different mentality altogether. It's not about killing the other player with poison, it's about making them suffer with poison. The very definition of what poison is all about. I believe that poison builds are for the patient sadists out there who are ready to strike when the iron's hot, applying pressure while the opponent is poisoned, and retreating or attempting to cure themselves, or just flat out panicking. It's all about causing panic, mess up their behavior, throw them off their balance. And Dark Souls 3 gives you some decent options and tools to do just that. Let's start off with the obvious arsenal, the Rotten Grew weapons, such as the dagger, curved sword, and the spear. Despite being subpar in all of their respective weapon classes, like there are better curved swords out there, definitely better daggers, and definitely better spears, having this trio of tools in a poison build is more useful than you might think. My personal setup involves using a soul level 35 with the following stats. I infuse the Rotten Grew dagger with poison for quicker procs up close, while I also infuse the spear and curved sword with heavy. I'm typically going to be two-handing these anyway, so might as well get the extra damage out that way. I can still buff both the curved sword and spear with rotten pine resin to proc the poison, because they also come with innate poison themselves. The curved sword is quick and can easily catch panic rolls. It's even faster than the Karthus curved sword, though this is more due to a recent patch that FromSoft had on the larger curved swords. They don't hit as fast anymore, and they definitely don't roll catch as much. When using the spear, you have to heavily rely on its range. You are either pursuing players to finish the job, or playing keep out against any R1 spam that will inevitably be heading your way. Another solid choice is the Spotted Whip. However, using whips is a whole nother challenge in and of itself. They require precise attacks and setups in order to just do basic damage with them. If you actually want to learn some tips about how to use whips, I'd recommend checking out the YouTuber Juutas. He talked about how to use whips with certain particular combos and roll catching techniques that, if you're interested in, highly recommend you check out that video. It helped me immensely with my whip game, for sure. But for now, what you need to know is that the R2 and the weapon art are going to be your bread and butter when using this weapon. It has both the range to catch players at a distance and to catch players in the middle of their rolls, leading to quicker poison procs than probably what you or the other guy is expecting. And if you're feeling cheeky, whips can even ignore walls. I would also be remiss to mention that after recent patches, luck scaling with poison buildup has also increased. What this means is that the higher luck you have, the quicker you're able to proc poison. But this info isn't too important, since it only infects weapons that are actually infused with poison gems. And as a tip coming from a loser who uses poison a lot, you don't typically want to infuse more than one weapon with a poison infusion. Unless you have many duplicates, then by all means go right ahead. Higher luck doesn't translate into higher poison damage, only the quicker poison procs. So increasing your luck isn't necessarily advised, unless you're running bleed infusions along with it.
Well, that's a whole nother story.
Side note number 2. You're probably wondering if I'm going to neglect to talk about Toxic. It's essentially the better poison, right? The reality is as follows. Toxic's utility is incredibly low compared to poison. There are only two ways that a player can inflict toxic to other players, with dung pies or with toxic mist. It shouldn't be too hard to figure out which of these methods is the easier one to do. Neither of them. So here's some more advice if you haven't tired of it yet. Toxic Mist does more damage to players than the Storyteller staff, but Dung Pies do more damage than both. Another added plus is that Toxic can lower stamina regeneration on players if you do happen to proc it on them. On the flip side, don't use Dung Pies on bosses. Believe me, I've tried. Compared to PvE though, Storyteller is far more damaging. Several times more. It is pretty stupid how much damage the staff ends up doing. In case you're not totally convinced, when I used the Storyteller on Gale, it outclassed both Poison and Toxic Mist. But you don't have to worry about whether or not this is inherently balanced, because FromSoft could very easily stealth patch this if they really wanted to. And it would ruin a lot of fun for a very small group of crazy people out there who dare to still play this game. So, in conclusion, I personally like Poison. The times I've used it, it's been fun and a huge change of pace compared to what you normally see in a Dark Souls 3 fight. If you want to hear my honest opinion about how useful Poison is, I'd say that it has its uses, but like most other builds in this game, it requires you to put so much more effort into making it work than somebody else who's just using a heavy infused split leaf greatsword.
Damn. That actually did damage.
And that's about it for me. If you learned a little something and you liked what you saw, subscribe for more terrible videos from yours truly. If it didn't help you in the slightest though, by all means, I want you to comment below about how this video is not even good and how Dark Souls is dead.
Come on. Do it. Do it.